I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by Dr. Biodun Adedipe, an economist and management consultant. Welcome.
Good evening.
Dr. Jim Yong Kim has been named now as the new president of the World Bank. How do you see this development?
Well, I will say that there are two perspectives to this, and each of these perspectives I also see two angles to each of them.
Okay.
Now, the first in terms of perspectives is history, and then the second one is what the world is today as compared to when the Bretton Woods institutions were established. Now, in terms of history, two perspectives. One is looking at the previous presidents of the World Bank, and then the second one is considering how their performance in office should have actually influenced the selection of future presidents of the World Bank. Now, historically, we've had 11 presidents, and then we ask ourselves, how did they make it to the office? First is the strong position of the US, which I will talk about later, but primarily you look at the background in terms of experience and exposure of the former presidents. Out of 11 of them, 9 had very strong economics and or finance background. Only 2 of them had no such record. One was a congressman, and then the other one was from Ford Motor Corporation. That is McNamara and Baba Konebo.
And now we have a health expert.
Now we have a health expert, making the third president of the World Bank not having economic or finance background. Now, that is on the one side. If you look at that only, you probably will say, well, there's really nothing particular that would disqualify Kim. But it's a lot more than that. Now, the second perspective is to now say, look, how have these presidents performed in office? In which case you present their scorecard and say, as it is done normally when you talk about executive selection, that ordinarily the performance of previous occupiers of an office should be a guide to selection of a future candidate.
Okay.
So, but there is actually no such scorecard that is presented to make you say, well, those with finance and strong economic background perform better in the office. But now, looking at the other angle to it, which is, one, the position of the U.S. as the majority shareholder, along with its allies, representing about 54% of shareholding of the World Bank. Now, that puts it in a very strong position to contend and actually dictate whoever will occupy that office.
And that brings us to politics.
Precisely.
As against merit, which has become a very popular phrase.
In actual fact, that is my drift in all of this. That if you look at the history and the overbearing emphasis on politics, they will likely get candidates that will come up in this same manner through such process, which is a matter of, look, who are my allies? Once I get them to see things from my perspective, not minding who my candidate is, which in fact in this instance, yes, there was the general sentiment that whoever will emerge as the World Bank president this time around should have some connection somewhat with the emerging economies. Okay. Now, you look at the current president appointed today, and he has Korean background, but he is indeed a Korean American. But there is also this general perception that he is more American than Korean in reality. So now, taking it from that perspective, we then ask ourselves, if the U.S. and her allies have such a strong shareholding, majority of it, that puts them in a pole position. At any point in time, you have to look at the shareholding as a basis for the strength of the voice in appointing a president. Now, it means them pointing forward that is an area to look at. If the major economies will, in any case, want to also stand up and say, let's make some changes here that should make this process better and more transparent.
All right, but now this tenure is for 5 years.
5 years.
So emerging economies actually have 5 years to prepare their strategy.
That's right.
So that next time around, you know, they are actually appointed.
Yes. And
or represented.
Exactly. Now, I see two issues in there. The first is recognizing that, yes, we need to push more for merit-driven process rather than the political angle to it. So, and that process should start right now.
All right.
Equally, a restructuring of the shareholding of the World Bank itself is something they should also begin to look at. Maybe equally an advice to the US, and that is to recognize that the world has changed and it is still changing.
All right.
And that in any case, whether US likes it or not, these emerging economies are getting stronger by the day. And there will come a time US needs them more than they think they need them now. Interdependence.